Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's me, Stephanie, and I'm coming at you guys with a new podcast for today. Today's podcast topic is going to be about disillusionment and disattachment from people who may have very toxic effects on your well-being and your psyche. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this today is because I feel like the people that we hold true to our hearts and hold fast to our hearts can be very toxic and very in ways that they might not intentionally be toxic. So, for example, I think the first interaction with toxic people that we may have are with our parents, our parental units, our mother and our father. Whether or not we have both mother and father, or we just have one mother or one father, or we have both mother and father, but one is a single parent, so you're more inclined to be around your mother than your father or your mother or whichever. So these relationships can very much so impact the way that we make romantic relationships and platonic relationships as well. So yeah, I don't have a British accent, so we'll see how this goes in this video. The personal reason why I decided to choose this topic is because I feel like being in a relationship that I'm in now, I definitely can, after years of arguments and disagreements and misunderstandings and all that stuff, I can really see how a lot of the positive and negative traits have affected me and the way that I relate to others. For example, I'm just going to use a very generic example. Like, let's say hypothetically, I have a mother who is extremely unaffectionate, someone who really does not know how to be affectionate, someone who doesn't know how to show love in a very healthy way. Let's say I know a lot of single mothers who have male children, so single mothers who have sons, they kind of end up treating that son as kind of the main male figure. For example, treating them as if it's their husband, or treating them as if it's their confidant or best friend or something like that. So with that kind of relationship dynamic, you can see that mother being kind of clingy, being kind of over obsessed over her son, and pretty much just nagging all the time, being on their case. And that son will probably be very much attached to the mother, but as he grows older, he probably will want to stray away from that in some kind of sense. So he'll still be attached to his mother, but in the same light still want to go away from her at the same time. So how would this affect a romantic relationship, you may ask? I feel that this may impact a very romantic relationship by having that same dynamic in that relationship. So that same son who felt very, nagged and clung on to by his mother, who is a single mother who doesn't really have any other male figure to show love to, who kind of clutches on very, very, very tightly to her son. That child growing up into a man, he might feel the same way about women. So he might reject that affection, he might reject that love and see it as something clingy, even though it may not be. Also, tying into that whole concept, I feel like the people who you attract into your life usually have the same flaws or the same kind of temperament as your parents would have towards you. So if you have a mother who, is the complete opposite of the last mother, if you have a mother who is never really there, she works all the time, she, never really has time for you, and, you have like a nanny who you are raised with, and you don't really have a true relationship with that person who you call your mother, who is your biological mother, you'll probably attract someone who is the same exact way. So you'll probably end up attracting a woman who is very disattached, someone who is very neglectful, someone who doesn't really know how to spend time with you, someone who doesn't really know how to show affection, someone who probably tries to like buy your love or something, if that's what your mother did to you. And the same vice versa. So if you're a woman and your father was that way, then it'll probably end up being the same exact way. So, disillusionment. I think growing up as a child, we have this vision of our parents as being perfect, that they know everything, that obviously they're older than you, so they know more about the world, they're more wise, they don't really have flaws. These are the pinnacle human beings. Like, they raised you, they taught you how to be a human, they taught you from age 0 to whatever age you are now. It's very necessary for you as an adult or as a young adult to become disillusioned from that. Well, not disillusioned, realizing that disillusionment that you have been kind of veiled with your whole entire life. So take that veil off of your head and see your parents for who they truly are, as people, not as your parents. See your mother as just a random woman that you probably know, like your neighbor or your teacher or something, someone that you really have no biological ties to. See her as that person. See all her personality flaws for what they truly are. Don't overlook them, because when you do overlook them, you fail to see those same personality flaws and character flaws within yourself. Because being that we were raised with our parents, and those are the people who we kind of model ourselves after, consciously or subconsciously, it's easy for us to see those character flaws and personality flaws as just seeing them as just a part of them, and seeing it as something unique to them, then that has nothing to do with me. But once you involve yourself with other people, like a platonic or a romantic relationship, then you'll see that those same character and personality flaws, which you never really understood about your parents and you never really recognized in your parents, you hold within yourself as well. I personally have been in a relationship for over 3 years. And in this third year is when I first started to realize the same characteristics and flaws, and not only flaws, but good things, positive attributes about my parents that I hold true within myself. I think it's really important for young adults to move outside of the nest, get out of the home that you were raised in, because it's almost impossible to progress in that kind of environment. If you leave and then you come back, then that's another thing. But just staying in that same household for your whole entire life, being around your same, parents and influences and, family members, whatever environment you were raised in, it really kind of makes it a lot harder for you to recognize who you are aside from who your parents are, or who your siblings are, and who your cousins are, and who your family members are, and who your childhood friends are. You might think that the safest place, or the people who have the best intentions for you, are your parents, are your family, and that can be true. I'm not saying that it is not true. I'm not saying that they intentionally brought these things upon you. Like, your mother did not intentionally give her your trait of having a really bad temper or having really bad eating habits. However, you being exposed to that for 18 or so years, or for however long you've been exposed to it, it just becomes a part of your daily habitual routine. It just becomes a part of yourself, and it becomes a part of the things that you do consistently, and the way that you react, and the way that you communicate, and the way that you see the world, whether you realize it or not. That's why I say disillusionment is very real when it comes to living with your parents, or with the same kinds of people for a very long period of time. And it doesn't really have to be your family either. It can be your friends. So if you have the same friend since elementary school and now you're in college, it will be very hard for you to just see yourself without that person. And not only seeing yourself without that person, but once you do, move away, and once you do start to change and grow and develop as a human being, when you go back home and you see that same best friend who you've known since elementary school, they're going to say you changed. They're going to say that you're different, that you're not the same as you used to. And that's a good thing. This is very much so parallel to what I meant when I said it's very imperative that as a young adult you move outside of your home, the place that you were raised with, around the people that you were raised with. And this is because when you leave, you have that stark contrast from that environment that you were brought up in. So when you go off to college and then you come back home for winter break and you start noticing, your mother or your father's character flaws and things that they haven't really worked on, and you recognize it and you kind of compare it to yourself and wonder, like, have I been doing this? Am I the same way? Like, have I unconsciously been, developing those same character flaws and same personality flaws? Do I have a really bad temper? Do I have really bad eating habits? Am I neglectful of my partner? Am I whatever X, Y, or Z? Am I bitter? Am I blindly religious? Am I whatever it is? Have I not opened up my mind to the world, to other characteristics that I can attribute to myself, as opposed to holding fast to the things that I've been identifying with just because I've been exposed to it for so long? You begin to ask yourself these questions. So if you live with a parent that you never really got along with and that you kind of clashed with all the time, and you notice that you clash with your friends, or you notice that you clash with, your loved ones, your, boyfriend or girlfriend or wife or husband, you can look at the relationship between your parents, or if they don't have a relationship, if they're not married, like if your mother and father are not together, or if you just have a single mother, the relationship between your mother and your sisters, and or just you, if you're, an only child, you will notice that you guys have a lot of similarities with the way that you treat people outside of your family complex. So going back to disillusionment and disattachment. So now we can realize how and why we have been disillusioned by the relationships that we have with our parents, with our close friends, with people who we've basically known our entire lives. This is the point where disattachment comes in handy. And that doesn't mean that you don't carry the same relationship that you have with your mother, or with your father, or with your brother, or with your best friend, or with your cousin, or whoever it is that you feel you have been heavily influenced by. What it means is that you start to distance yourself in a way, not mentally or physically or whatever. What you start to do is you start to observe, you start to analyze, you start to pick that person apart, not in a negative way, but in a very objective way, in the way where you start to recognize that, hey, this is my mom or this is my dad, but he has a really bad drinking problem, and maybe I learned that from him. Or this is my older brother, and I really put him on a pedestal for so long, but he really is very lazy and he has really bad, work ethic or something. These are just examples that I'm giving out. I don't have an older brother or anything, but you can start to separate yourself from that person. Once you start to separate yourself from that person, not physically or mentally or the relationship that you have with them, but once that starts to happen, you can turn and look back into yourself and start to evaluate yourself and try to realize the things that you have in common with these people who you're very close with, or these people who you've been exposed to for such a long time. And you can look at yourself in a more objective way and not feel like you are totally different from this person, and not feel like you're so individualistic. You'll start to realize, like, wow, I kind of put my brother on a pedestal, but I kind of at the same time gained his same poor work ethic and procrastination habits. Or, I may have not realized it, but I kind of gained my father's bad drinking habits and alcoholism. That being said, you don't really have to bring that to the attention of the person that you're analyzing or observing. You don't really have to go to that person and say, hey, I think you have a really bad anger problem and I think you should work on that, because it's really not your place to say that. I mean, it may be something that compels you to want to bring to light to that certain person, but in my opinion, if that person doesn't really ask for your opinion or your thoughts or whatever, I feel like it is not really your business. But if you do care about that person, and if you go about it the right way, you can bring it to their attention and try to say, hey, I just noticed, ever since I moved out or whatever, and I haven't been hanging out with you lately, and I came back and I noticed, some things about you that you may want to work on, or whatever you want to say. But that's really not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this podcast is to recognize how you may have been disillusioned from a very young age, as a child or as a teenager or whatever, or even as a young adult, and to basically disattach yourself from that state of mind and to heal in that sense. It's very important to look at the people who you associate yourself with to gain a better understanding of who you are. The reason why I say this is because when you recognize weaknesses within the people who you love and the people who you appreciate and the people who you spend the most of your time with, you'll notice that they can kind of mirror the same weaknesses within yourself. Not to say that they're bringing you down or anything, but people usually attract the same people who are on the same wavelength, in a sense. And you don't have to basically stop talking to your family or stop talking to your mom, stop talking to your best friend, but you can kind of disattach yourself from those bad habits that they share. Disattach yourself from the bad behavior that they conduct themselves in. An example for me is, I feel like my mother, she can be very argumentative and want to pick a fight for pretty much anything. And now when I go back home to where I'm from, to my home that I grew up in, and I just recognize the signs of, she's upset, not particularly at me, but at the world or whatever. Now I don't really have to feed into it. Now I can recognize those signs. I can see the weaknesses within her. It doesn't mean that she's a bad person. It doesn't mean that I don't love my mother. It just means that I don't really have to engage and carry myself in a way that I feel is very unhealthy and unresourceful, if that makes sense. When we stop putting the people in our lives on a pedestal and we see that everyone indeed is very equal and everyone indeed is very connected, then we can better ourselves. And then once we start to better ourselves, and once the people in our lives and our loved ones, they start to recognize that we are growing and that we are healing, that will attract them to us. That will make them ask us, hey, something about you has changed, or teach me your ways, or whatever. And then at that point, you can probably point out whatever you want to say, or tell them how you got to the place that you got to, pretty much. So that's the end of my podcast. I hope you guys really enjoyed this topic. Please comment down below to tell me if there's anything that you would like to hear about. Please comment down below also if you agree or if you disagree with anything that I said. Share your testimonies, share your stories, share relationships with your mother or your father or whatever. Share stories about that and see, how maybe you guys have some certain similarities which you didn't really recognize in the first place, or share how maybe you are acting out in your relationship or in your friendships in the same way that you were raised to act out when you were younger. I am very interested in this topic, and I hope you guys share this podcast to anyone who may need some healing or need some guidance and disillusionment issues. And please remember to like, comment, and to subscribe if you like this video, and see you guys in the next one. Bye.